After 2 testing days at the Fiorno Ferrari track, we get to see 2 configurations of the car. We get to see the 2022 F-175 with the very iffy HP livery. We also see some rookies in the car and some actual crazy wheel covers we're going to go over as well. But finally, we get to see the awaited Imola Ferrari upgrades. We get to see them early with some trackside pictures that Formula Uno was able to grab of the car and its upgrades, and we're going to go over exactly what's on this Ferrari car, what's new, and some things we get to decipher. Not everything will be clear as day, and I think we'll get more of it on Thursday for my Thursday video, but we do get to see a lot of it, and this is the first look at the SF-24, the evolution of it. Before getting into the bigger part of the video, wanted to thank you guys for sticking around and being with me and watching the videos. If you're new here, I'd love if you subscribe. It would mean a lot to me, and we're genuinely killing it in the avenue of views, subscribers, everything, so thank you so much for that. But let's get started into this video. As I said, I wanted to talk about the wheel covers here mainly. They were on this Fiorno track, and the main thing they got here was 200 kilometers of running. They needed to test these tires, but they also wanted to use that for upgrades. And I think some people have seen these, but to people that haven't, these are these crazy wheel cover ideas they've had. Last year, they also went for something that kind of looked like mud flaps, but this year it's a much more different design, and it's way more extreme and quite ugly, might I add. But I don't really care for the aesthetic of it as long as it's actually able to do what it's supposed to do and disperse the water at a much better rate. But when you think about these cars and why it's such an issue in the rain, it's mainly the diffuser, and if there's no way to actually block off that diffuser and the actual spray, as you can see in this picture, one has wheel covers, the other one doesn't. And while it does slightly impact that, most of this mist and water that is coming out of the back of the car is coming from the diffuser. It's pretty clear as day that that is where the majority of this mist buildup is happening, and it will only continue to happen unless there is some type of solution to where it's not going to kill the car aerodynamically. But till that happens, we're going to have a continuous problem of these cars running on rain. Unfortunately, that is a circumstance, but it doesn't mean that these cars can't do it. It's just that they're pretty heavy, they're big cars, they're bulky, but with the addition of these wheel covers that they're looking at, which the FIA has already came out and said that they really aren't that great. They said that for the last solution too with the mud flaps, that it's not really doing as much as they'd hope so. So that's kind of 2 fails in a row, but hopefully we do end up coming to some solution which would allow for us to have a bit of better racing. But let's get into what everybody has waited for. This is the SF-24 Evo. Now there are plenty of pictures of this car from afar, but we really want to dive deeper into this car and see it from a closer view. What we first will look at is this actual front view of the car. So what is new on this car? What isn't new on this car? The actual front wing is not changed. It's still pretty much the same front wing we've been seeing on this car. The front and the rear wing, now the rear wing is a little revised to what they had before, but not too much. Just the rear corner edges that you can see here, it's a little bit more straight lined out, but it's still that medium downforce rear wing. I think we're going to see a different set of rear wings throughout this car start to come along in Monaco. Medium downforce is kind of what you need for Imola as well, so I'm not expecting much change there from that car. And it's hard to tell what are the changes on this car. It's quite deceptive from this angle, but I'll tell you this. If you actually look at the part that was the S-duct to the car, this is where the majority of the changes, and I think this is where we get that estimate of a 3 to 4 tenths time gain on the Ferrari car. As you can see, that is not the same halo solution that they had in the beginning of the year that was famously talked about even before the car came out. Now you get this more Cobra looking like aerodynamic part on that car. I think Cobra is a great way to describe it. If you actually look at that aerodynamic piece, that's kind of what that looks like. And it seems like a little bit that is obviously dictating airflow to be pushed in a certain direction rather than what it had before, which was a more in-washing concept and keeping the air more closer towards that engine cover and side pod design. Now, yes, it is still doing that on one side, but on the other, you can see that it's pushing some of the air outwards. And this is a newer solution on the car. If we actually look at it now from a side angle, This is where we get to see now the actual differences in the car. As you can already see, that side pod design is finally different. Now, many people are calling this a Red Bull-like design, but it's not like a Red Bull design. Yes, it is an overbite, but when you look at this closely resembles the Mercedes car with that P-shaped inlet, because the actual overbite, that shark bite, is connected to that S-duct inlet. Now, I'm also going to go over this S-duct because I believe this is not an S-duct anymore like it was on the car before. I think it's a different solution to that of before because of a couple of things that I've seen and some different innovations they've added onto the car. Now, looking at this, what can this do? Why have they gone from that underbite setup that they had that was working so well for the car to a now overbite, which they even talked about, they tested, they said that it didn't run that well on the car, but now it's being put onto the car. And it's not a drastic overbite, but it is definitely there. This P-shaped style undercut also helps with the flow of air going more towards into that undercut area and gives more pressure into the area between the side pod and the bottom of that belly of the side pod, where the air is now being pushed out, whether that be for more outwash or more towards the rear part of the car. It does a great job of pushing that. Now, on the Mercedes, there is a huge undercut on this car. For the Ferrari, there is an undercut, but it still stays pretty true to something similar of that of the AMR 23, to where the actual undercut doesn't go as severely under the whole entire side pod, but more towards the frontal part where there is that undercut shape, while the Mercedes has it going all the way towards the back of the rear part of the car and almost hitting that rear edge of the floor. The actual floor design is still the same that it was before. There's no changes there, which it was reported that we were going to get something on the floor. And I'm telling you, I think this is not the full kit. I think this is part of it to see aerodynamically if it's working correctly before we go into Imola. But another part that I did want to talk about was that of the S-duct and why I don't believe that it's an S-duct anymore on this car. It was constantly getting questioned anyways whether this is going to be an S-duct or not, but now that they've connected the actual side pod and the inlet itself, every inlet has to be something for cooling. You can't just have it unnecessarily on the car. But what has definitely changed on this car is the engine cover cooling setup. And when you look at this picture, you can see how much bigger of a cooling gill that is, but also the change of where it's at and the aerodynamic change they've done towards the rear part of the engine cover. And this is important because this is probably where the air from what was the S-duct is now coming out of to provide more airflow towards the rear part of the car. This seems like the only solution they could really go for, and that Cobra design is helping dictate the airflow from either the side pod or the engine cover by the way that it's set up. And this engine cover airflow now, which I guess is still partially a S-duct, it's more similar to what the Red Bull had. The Red Bull actually has it all internally made to where you can't actually see what part of the vertical inlet is going out, but we have seen pictures and I've already described it, but I'll put up a picture real fast just to show you. It's very similar to that. It's going from that vertical parts all the way to the back, hitting that beam wing and giving it more airflow towards the rear part of the car. The last aerodynamic part that they've changed on this car is that little mirror fairing. We can see a little aerodynamic part that they've added for better airflow, and it does look like those mirrors are a little bit more extended, but they've always been to take away drag anyways. So the Ferrari car is changed, but is it as severe as we thought? Well, it is quite aggressive because they've changed the whole entire concept, now making it an overbite. But we'll have to see if it's really a 3 to 4 tenths gain, like they've said, because that would actually put them ahead of Red Bull, which they are claiming they will be in Imola. Quite excited to see this. Can't believe to light that on me again, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe, it means the world, and peace.